Hi, this is Paul, and this is Rough Draft for Sunday, where I run through the current version of my Sunday sermon. This one was a little tougher to get together. We'll see what you think of it. Did my little Google Zeitgeist search on image search on king, and you tend to get a lot of, I wasn't quite sure how all those little buttons on top worked, but a lot of medieval type kings. You have swords, you have armor, you have crowns, and then you get some other type of images. But king is sort of relegated for much of the world to sort of an archaic past. If you do a concordant search of the Gospel of John, the question of Jesus as king picks up. It starts fairly early with Philip and Nathanael. Philip believes that he has, well, I can just read it. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Simon, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and said, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." "Nazareth? Can anything good come from there, Nazareth?" Nathanael asks. "Come and see," said Philip. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said of him, Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, "I saw you while you were under the fig tree before Philip called you." Then Nathanael declared, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Now, Rabbi, teacher, you are the Son of God. Keep this in mind as we go through the texts. You are the King of Israel. Why would the King of Israel be the Son of God? Jesus said, "You believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. Now you will see greater things than that." And he added, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." There's another title. John chapter 6. After feeding the 5,000. When they had all had enough, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who has come into the world." And you'll see this of Jesus often through the Gospels. He's a prophet. He does miracles. Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain himself. Obviously, this was not how Jesus wanted to become king. This was not what he was looking for. But notice they wanted to make him king. The next day, the great crowd had come from the festival that heard Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem. This is the classic Palm Sunday text. "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel." This is what they are saying to Jesus. Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, as it is written, "Do not be afraid, daughter Zion. See, your king is coming, seated on a donkey." At first his disciples did not understand all of this. Only after Jesus was glorified did they realize that these things had been written about him and that these things had to be done to him. Now the crowd that was with him, when he called Lazarus from the tomb and raised him from the dead, continued to spread the word. Many people, because they had heard that he had performed the sign, went out to meet him. So the Pharisees said to one another, "See, this is getting us nowhere. Look how the whole world has gone after him." Now, what you see in these 3 kingship texts is that they all follow miracles, and this shouldn't come as a surprise. Just recently on Unbelievable, Bart Ehrman, who used to be an evangelical and deconverted and is a scholar of history around the time of the New Testament, wrote a book a couple of years ago about how Christianity won the empire. And one of the things that he noted in this Unbelievable podcast was that, well, it was because of miracles. Now, he has a number of other theories that I won't go into here, but converted is sort of an acronym. What really were people? How did people then frame it? People didn't really conceptualize religion in the way we do now in our secular frame. People, like we see here in the Gospel of John, chose their path when they saw revelations of divine power or authority. And so they would seek the patronage of those through whom divine power or authority would flow. And quite clearly in the Gospel of John, people are seeing this of Jesus, and they are following him, and they want to make him king. Now, last week we saw with the Romans that the Romans very much saw the world in a similar way. When this eagle dropped the hen into Livia's lap with a laurel sprig in its mouth, the hen then had a brood, and that was sustained, and the laurel was planted, and Suetonius very much saw the flourishing of the laurels and then their eventual dying as the living and dying of the Claudian house, the Julian-Claudian house of the empires. And so it rose and it fell basically with Nero. We saw that last week. And last week we also saw that this word king goes back and forth with Pilate. That's obviously sort of the nexus of politics and religion. Figuring out the relationship between politics and religion is always complex. In the ancient world, it's even more complex because they're sort of the same thing. Notice that after Jesus does miracles, they want to make him king. Jesus will say to Pilate, "My kingdom is not from this world." And I've often made the relationships that politics is now, religion is always. Politics is cents, and religion is dollars. Now, the history of kingship in Israel is complex, and you have to go all the way back to the book of 1 Samuel. When Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as Israel's leaders. Samuel was really the last of what we call often the judges. They were sort of leaders of Israel who would bring the different tribes together and help them organize and fight as one against their neighboring rivals. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second was Abijah, and they served at Beersheba. But his sons did not follow his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. So part of what the judges would do, as we said, they were judges. People would come with their disputes, and the judge was supposed to offer judgment between the parties. But now if they're accepting bribes, they are in fact perverting justice. And so the tribal elders didn't want Samuel's sons. This is important because, of course, earlier in the book, you had the house of Eli, and his sons were corrupt. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, "You are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." Is this a good idea? But when they said, "Give us a king to lead us," this displeased Samuel, so he prayed to the Lord. And the Lord told him, "Listen to all the people are saying to you. It is not that you that they have rejected. It is not you that they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king." And so basically, you see, with God, with Israel's God, he is their king, and others served under him, such as the judges. "As they have done from the day I brought them out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are doing to you." In other words, Israel's unfaithfulness sort of goes up and down the ladder. "Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what the king will reign, what the king who will reign over them will claim as his rights. He will take your sons for his army, and your daughter as his wives and servants." And that's in fact what happens. Now, of course, David becomes really the epitome of who Israel's king should be. And Psalm 23, very famous psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths of his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This is a psalm of David singing to his king, the Lord. But in some ways, it's, again, sort of scales up and down. Israel's kings are sub-kings of the great king who reigns from heaven. That's the way it's supposed to work. One of the most quoted psalms in the New Testament of Jesus is Psalm 2. You very much get a sense of how this kingship and worldly power sort of come together. Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth rise up, and the rulers band together against the Lord and his anointed, saying, Let us break their chains and throw off their shackles. The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. He rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. Very much you get the sense of the Judean culture war, where Jerusalem is supposed to rule the world because the ruler of heaven and earth has installed his king on Zion, the holy mountain. I will proclaim the Lord's decrees. He said to me, You are my son. Today I have become your father. This is a psalm sort of royal coronation. David is the king's son. The Lord is David's father. Ask me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will break them with a rod of iron. You will dash them to pieces like pottery. This is exactly what Rome has done to the world, including Israel. Therefore, you kings, be wise, be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and celebrate his rule with trembling. Kiss his son, or he will be angry, and your way will lead to destruction. For his wrath can flare up in a moment. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. And again, this will be applied to Jesus. Now, you can, I forget the word understand. You can understand the expectations of Jesus' followers. He's doing miracles, make him king. He has this divine power. God's working through him, make him king. God's son is supposed to be this giant and protect little Israel, to hold him in the palm of his hand. And when the Roman legions come up, God's servant should become like David in battle and defeat the enemies of God and cleanse God's holy land and restore God's holy people. And we can imagine Jesus, why won't you do this? If you are the Messiah, the anointed one, God's son, why won't you act against the Romans? The fastest growing cult in the first century is of the Son of God, Augustus, son of Julius Caesar. Statues, cults all over the Eastern Roman Empire. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about these shields that Pilate had in honor of Tiberius. They had to go into the temple of divine Augustus in Caesarea because the Jews wouldn't let them into Jerusalem. Tom Holland describes the cult of the Caesars. Command and swagger were the very essence of the cult of the Caesars. To rule as an emperor, an imperator, was to rule as victorious general. In every town in Galatia and every square, statues of Caesar served as a reminder to his subjects that to rank as a son of God was by definition to embody earthly greatness. The story of Jesus is strange. From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be king opposes Caesar." But Jesus doesn't look like the robot weapon. Jesus doesn't look like he's a threat to Caesar. Everybody knows the tools of Caesar. Everybody knows what this looks like. And this Jesus isn't it. When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down in the judge's seat at the place known as the Stone Pavement. It was the day of preparation for the Passover. It was about noon. "Here is your king." Oh, Pilate. Pilate said to the Jews, but they shouted, "Take him away, take him away, crucify him." They understand the insult. What kind of king are they looking for? They're looking for a Psalm 2 type king who will smash the enemies and be the Son of God and hold Israel in the palm of their hand. And when the Romans come, destroy them. Make Jerusalem great again. From his holy mountain, the Son of God should have the nations tremble. Jesus? "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar." They might have said, "The only kings we recognize look like Caesar." Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified, so the soldiers took charge of Jesus. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side and Jesus in the middle. Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened to the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Jesus is hailed as king twice by Jerusalem. Once by the crowd on his way into the city after seeing Jesus raise Lazarus. This is the king. He has the power. He will do it. Now Pilate, mocking, "You little nation, you little backwater that I've been sent to govern over." A nation has a king like this. No power, no weapons. Many of the Jews read the sign, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and the sign was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek for the whole world to read. The chief priests of the Jews protested to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews, but that this man claimed to be King of the Jews." Pilate, come on. Don't you see it as we see it? That this man is a lunatic or a liar or something even more horrible than that? A vessel for demons to work through? Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." A tautology that will go on in history. What kind of king is flogged, mocked, crown of thorns, purple robe, humiliated? Where are his followers to free him? That's what happens with kings. He said strange things to Pilate. He could summon legions of angels. Pilate only has authority from that which is given from above, from the skies that drop hens with sprigs of laurel. The Romans insult their vassal by parading this loser and crucifying him outside their holy city. "Oh, Jerusalem, you'll never be Rome. Mount Zion will never be like the 7 hills of Rome." Israel, no. But when it came to politics, everyone was playing from the same playbook. Again, just read Josephus. Caiaphas, the high priest. Anybody know who named him? It was Pilate's predecessor. They're all playing from the same book. They're all using the same tools. They're all managing the same game. And in that game, Rome will win. They'll have a big showdown in 70 with Bar Kokhba later. Again and again, little Jerusalem will try to play this game, and each time it will lose. What game is Jesus playing? The book of Ezekiel says this about the leaders of Israel. "The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, Prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to you, shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You eat the curds, clothe yourself with the wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock. You have not strengthened the weak, or healed the sick, or bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays, or searched for the lost. You have ruled them harshly and brutally. So they were scattered, because there was no shepherd. And when they were scattered, they became food for all the wild animals. I think in Jesus' time, they very much agreed with this. This was the quality of their leaders. Sharp elbows are in bed with Rome, named by the Roman middlemen, even their own high priests. But my sheep wandered over all the mountains and every high hill, and they were scattered over the whole earth, and no one searched or looked for them. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, because my flock lacks a shepherd, and so has been plundered and has become food for all the wild animals, and because my shepherds did not search for my flock, but cared for themselves rather than my flock, therefore you shepherds hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says, I am against the shepherd and will hold them accountable for my flock. I will remove them from tending the flocks so that the shepherds can no longer feed themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouths, and it will no longer be food for them. The border between heavenly and earthly, between the heavenly and the earthly, was widely held to be permeable. In Egypt, the oldest of the monarchies, kings had been objects of worship for unfathomable eons. In Greece, stories were told of a hero god by the name of Hercules or Heracles, a muscle-bound monster slayer who, after a lifetime of spectacular feats, had been swept up from the flames of his own pyre to join the immortals in heaven. Among the Romans, a similar fate was told of Romulus, the founder of their city. Divinity, then, was for the greatest of the greats, for victors and for heroes and for kings. Its measure was the power to torture one's enemies, not to suffer it oneself, to nail them to the rocks of a mountain, or to turn them into spiders, or to blind and crucify them after conquering the world. That a man who had himself be crucified might be hailed as a god, could not help but be seen by people everywhere across the Roman world as scandalous, obscene, grotesque. That such a God, of all gods, might have had a son, and that this son, suffering the fate of a slave, might have been tortured to death on a cross, were claims as stupefying as they were to most Jews repellent. No more shocking a reversal of their most devoutly held assumptions could possibly have been imagined. Not merely blasphemy, it was madness. Jesus, King of the Jews, Aramaic, Greek, Latin. The book of Jeremiah. Woe to the shepherds who are destroying and scattering the sheep of my pasture, declares the Lord. Therefore, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says to the shepherds who tend my people. Because you have scattered my flock and driven them away and have not bestowed care on them, I will bestow punishment on you for the evil you have done, declares the Lord. I myself will gather the remnant of my flock out of all the countries where I have driven them, and I will bring them back to their pasture, where they will be fruitful and increase in number. I will place shepherds over them who will tend them, and they will no longer be afraid or terrified, nor will any be missing, declares the Lord. The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, a king who will reign wisely and do what is just and right in the land. In his days Judah will be saved, and Israel will live in safety. This is the name by which he will be called, the Lord, our righteous Savior. This is Palm Sunday. Jesus is hailed as king, first by the crowd, and then by the Romans. But what kind of a king is he? How can we know that God in heaven is on our side? How can we know that the God of heaven cares? How can we know that the God of heaven will bring justice and will set the world right? We know because he's not a giant weapon. We know because he became one of us and suffered in our place. How do you recognize a king? The great king suffers for his people. He tends his sheep. He gathers his lambs. He suffers himself like the good shepherd to restore his flock. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.